You, you, may be doing something really special or important, and you may need help getting the word out. We got you. Email us at guestwhopod@p4cm.com about advertising to our listeners.
Hosted by Maliek Blade.
This week's guest is
CEO of Black Christian Influencers, Jackie the Educator. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. I have Jackie on today to share a little bit about her history as it relates to working within education and also the mission of Black Christian Influencers. I'm thrilled to have you on as I see that Black Christian Influencers really takes the time to highlight people doing special work in unique areas. And that's one of the missions of this podcast as well. Guest two, we have a different guest that we highlight each week for their area of specialty or any special work that they're doing. So I want to applaud you for your work with Black Christian Influencers and say thank you for taking the time to highlight the work that's being done.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate what you guys are doing. I think more people are needed to kind of do this kind of work.
Absolutely. So for our audience who may not be familiar with you, could you give them your background as it relates to education? I most recently have worked at colleges and universities. Never saw myself as an academic or an educator per se, but I have some experience in university life. So could you speak to your background in education? And also, I see you're starting a doctoral degree.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am background, obviously in education, my master's in counseling and education. And so a lot of my time in the workforce has been in the college industry working with students directly. And I love it. I love teaching. I love being there for students to kind of walk them through their process of learning. And that's what I've been doing for majority of my life until I move now into more of a ministerial frame with BCI as well as some other ventures that I'm doing. But my doctoral program is going to be in counseling, which is something that I'm really passionate about as well. I'm opening something called a counseling cafe in West Inglewood, and we're venturing to create a space that will allow for people to come and just have casual conversations over coffee with counselors that are volunteering their time. So that's one of my biggest ventures right now. And Jackie the Educator is an extension of that because I believe everything I do is educating people about the possibilities and just about themselves and how they can better themselves.
Great. I think that conversation about mental health and counseling and normalizing that is great. I'm seeing it happen in a variety of sectors, both secular and in the church, that specifically as it relates to Black people, there seems to be a renewed focus or ideology as it relates to counseling and being more open to it. I've seen some counselors over the years and have found it very beneficial. I think the stigma oftentimes has been for some that uh, something is wrong with you if you go to a counselor. And I like to see it as you going to a counselor can keep you from having something go wrong.
Right, correct. That's exactly what it is. And sometimes people don't understand because of, the bad reputation that counseling and therapy has gotten in the past from TV to just, people saying you need help. A lot of times it's not help, it's just support. It's you need somebody to listen to you because when you go throughout your day, you just have people always trying to throw information at you and nobody really listens. And so that's basically what counseling is. And once we start to show people that, people come in just regularly to talk about their week or their day. Everybody doesn't have a spouse or someone to come home to decompress with, or someone that's understanding of how it is to be a listener and not just someone who kind of gives information. And so it's so needed. And we're seeing so many barriers being broken just through this little act of a cup of coffee and having a conversation.
Absolutely. My experience with education has been unique. So, in the early part of my education, as far as early school, I went to public schools from kindergarten on up to sixth grade. Then I went to private school for seventh and eighth grade and high school as well. And then for college, I was at a private Christian school. I did a bachelor's in Christian studies and a minor, and I'm sorry, and a master's in ministry leadership. So, and I only did more degrees because I was pushed along after getting to college, but I didn't really, I had issues with the system itself as far as education. Like, I like learning, but the system through which I learn, I think, is different than what's normal as far as the schools. Like, I'm much more of a person, I guess you can call it auditory. I learn from listening and
Mm,
seeing rather than just reading. And I know for some people, rather than opposing education itself, it's important to see that no, education itself is great, but you have to hone in on the best way that you receive information. So I learned that my issue wasn't with school, it was with proper systems for me to receive information the best. What was your experience as far as learning how you learn?
absolutely. I think that's one of the biggest problems for most people is that they don't have someone who caters to their learning style. And most teachers have a specific way of teaching that's generally one style of learning. And, if you're somebody who is a kinesthetic learner and you're in somebody who's only an auditory, you're probably not going to have the best experience. But I think more teachers need to be open to just varying their teaching styles so that it accommodates to more than one learning type. So, for instance, for me, throughout a lesson, I'll probably use multiple learning styles. We'll have a portion where we do some experiential learning, and then we'll have sections where we do, like you said, the auditory and allowing people to just see it in different ways. And people probably would have a different experience about schooling and learning if they had it, in that type of way. But I think it's giving us a chance, though, even as like a Christian, how I am now, to learn how to witness and talk to people effectively about Christ, because it's very similar. You can't just have one style of talking to people and thinking it's going to work. Sometimes people need to they need to see it, they need to hear it, they need to live it. And so just with that, learning is just so important for us to make sure we're varying it, not just in education, but across the board, how we teach our friends, how we teach our family, and especially how we share Christ.
Hmm. Could you speak to the areas that you focused in as far as your studies, your bachelor's degree, your master's, and now what you're studying for your doctoral degree?
Yeah, yeah. So I did the education and counseling in my master's degree. My bachelor's degree was in business and advertising, very different than what
Yeah.
I kind of went into.
So that
I
happens a
have no
lot.
idea. Yeah, honestly, I think I saw an episode of Martin and Gina, and I was like, man, I want to do what Gina does when she used to go and kind of show those ads and promote things. And so nothing really came of that after I got into the real world. That marketing type thing was me selling knives door to door. And I was like, yeah, no, this isn't going to work.
Right, right.
And so I went there to work in an education field, worked for an institution where I got to be a center manager for a test prep organization. And I fell in love with learning and just teaching others how to do things. And so that's what kind of led me to this teaching and education realm. But then I've always had this passion for counseling and helping people to get through their problems. I believe counseling and teaching have so much in common because listening is involved with both. You can't be a good teacher if you're not a good listener. You can't be a good counselor if you're not a good listener. And so that's kind of went through my entire life of just balancing both of those. And now that I'm pursuing my doctoral degree in business psychology, it's all kind of wrapping everything into one now. I'm
Hmm.
able to now look on the corporate side of it and understand, how do you work with people how do you get the best work from them, and how do you do it in a way that will not just improve their morale, but the companies. And so I love the fact that now it's incorporating everything from my bachelor's degree to my master's, and now my doctoral degree will be a combination of everything.
Hmm. I've actually, so I was going to say, oh, I know you're studying psychology. I didn't know it was business psychology. I've never heard of that before. So if I were to
Yeah.
guess, is that studying the psyche or the mentality behind successful business persons, or am I
Yeah,
off?
the companies, the people that you work with, the company in general, like nonprofit organizations or for profit, that's just structure. You'll be, dissecting how that is. It's a lot of psychology in how those things are built, the types of people that you use in those positions, and just in general, the business world is psychology. Everything you do, how you interact with people is a form of psychology. And if you know the right way to do it, you can be very successful. People who are successful in business have, in one way or another, become some type of psychologist because they've learned how to work with the minds of different people. Because you work with so many different people in a business, and everybody has different styles, different ways of thinking. And if you understand the psychology of that, then you will be successful. So, business psychology will be able to bring everything together for me. And I think it's something that's unique. A lot of people don't know about it, but I'm excited to learn more and teach other people as well.
I think that you set us up very well in terms of a segue going from education and then transitioning to BCI, Black Christian Influencers, because of the business aspect. So, if you could share what led you to start Black Christian Influencers.
Yeah, that's funny. Actually, I have a show called Higher Learning. It's a YouTube show now. It started off as a podcast, oddly enough, and it now is a place for Christian intellectuals, millennials to come and learn about topics that people don't talk about anymore. So recently, I talked with a senator about the legalization of weed, and she's also a evangelist, and so she was pro weed legalization. And so we had a topic
Mm.
about that. And, it raised a lot of eyebrows. They were like, wait a
I'm
minute,
sure.
what?
I'm sure.
And so honestly, I'm like, nobody's talking about it in the pulpit. So I'm like, let's talk about it. I want to hear what people have to say. And
Well,
so
the
I
thing
was
is,
trying to
folks
find
are using though. They may not be talking about it, but
they
they're
are
using.
using it. Yep, they are. They're not going to preach it because they're using it and they don't want to cause controversy. But I'm like, hey, let's talk about it. And she was open about it and says that she doesn't think anything's wrong with using it. And a lot of ministers feel that way too. And it just was good to get it out. But for me, it was finding an audience that could relate to the content that I was creating. And I honestly took out my little notebook and I was like, okay, so who is my target market? I was like, well, they're most likely Black, they're probably Christians, and they're probably influencers, they're leaders, and then there it was on a sheet of paper, Black Christian influencers. And that was, for me, what I started doing was gathering people who I knew were like me. And I brought us together and I was like, hey, let's learn from each other. What are you doing? Let's talk about it together. Let's put it all in a group. And as I start getting this all together, for me, it was my network because I'm in the education. I have some ministry people. I have, my dad's a pastor. And so it's a lot of different backgrounds with me. And so when I brought the people together, they didn't know each other, but they was like, wow, that person's dope. That's awesome. And finally, it just came to me. It was like, hey, you know what? Let's just start a page and start promoting these people to the world and have a group where we can talk about this stuff internally. And the more I did it, the more people came on board. And I was like, okay, let's see where this goes. And 200 people, then 300 people, 4 or 5. Next thing I know, I'm like, okay, I need to get serious and create this into something, and once we started working on it, I was really intentional. Being a former director of diversity, I wanted to make sure we were making sure we promoted the marginalized in a way that did them justice. So a lot of people were asking questions like, why is it just for Black Christians? The kingdom is united, but I think that it's a strategy to it. If you're anybody in restorative justice work, there's a need for having the marginalized voice to be heard. And so this platform is doing that as we venture off into other segments of this as well. So more is to come, but it came out of something as small as pulling together a group of people that I thought would I could relate to.
Yeah. It's funny you saying that hit a nerve with me. So, in my time working in higher ed, I did mostly diversity work. So, my last title was Assistant Dean of Students for Diversity and Multicultural Student Services. And before
Okay.
that, I was a diversity coordinator and done a lot of diversity consulting. And these are, of course, in predominantly white spaces. And something that came up frequently was when things were black focused, people would get their panties in a bunch, I would say. And
Right.
and one thing was we had at one of the schools a black student union or a black student association. And the question was, well, aren't we supposed to be doing diversity and that includes everybody? Why do something black focused? And when I was addressing it, one of the things I said was in diversity, I think there's a twofold approach in the sense of doing things that are communal, but also supporting the underrepresented groups with something that is able to be their own. Because we
Correct.
need to recognize that in the spaces that I was in, we might look at it as the BSA is a black club, but I pointed out, hey guys, the whole university is a white club when we look at the majority. So let's
Exactly. Right.
understand that people are creating a space where they're allowed to be included as the
Mhm.
majority is looking at what it means to welcome people of other cultures and backgrounds. So I would I'll play devil's advocate and ask the question, why black Christian influencers rather than just Christian influencers?
Yeah, as I think you hit it when you talked about how it's it to have a voice for the marginalized before you expand into the majority. We have the majority voice heard, especially in the world of influencers, which we know is taking over. Influencers are becoming a very big part of our society, and especially within the marketing world. And if we don't have a voice that's, standing out, then we're going to be just like we were in every other cycle of mass takeovers. We always are the last to kind of get on board, and we're
Hmm.
sprinkled in. So I think it's important for us to be intentional on our presence in the marketplace. And that's why I wanted to do that first. I think that there will be another segment of Latinx Christian influencers so that
Yeah.
they can have a space where they are also brought to the forefront and shown with all of their greatness, in one space. And then there will be another segment of it where it's Christian influencers united. But before we can do a restorative work, we have to first do a repair within our own community. And so that's
Hmm.
what this is doing intentionally. Um, I just think it's important for us to not just talk about the work of restorative justice, but to actually apply it. And that's what I'm doing with this is trying to apply it to a concept that, will look like how it is now with starting off with where it's at and hopefully ending with something amazing.
Yeah, definitely. Um, in terms of BCI and the people that you highlight, in no particular order, with no priority or favoritism, could you just share with some of the people through your work with BCI that you highlighted that you learned more about and were inspired by?
Yeah, so many. There was a barber. He's not even a barber anymore. He does a nonprofit organization where he teaches underprivileged children how to cut hair and use that as a means for creating income for themselves. And so he started this junior barber college for kids. And he has this great non for profit organization that he ran. And he's a Christian. And when I heard about him, I'm like, wow. We really need to support this man. He's doing something that's awesome. He's not a famous football star or, a famous artist, but he's doing something that's really amazing and deserves some recognition. And so that's somebody who has totally inspired me. There are others who, for instance, doctors who do some great work, who do non for profits, who give and donate their services and times, who happen to also be ministers. I found that very interesting that, we have so many doctors that are doing dual roles, and a lot of times we don't give them recognition for what they do in the actual hospitals because that's a ministry in itself. being a voice of reason and faith amongst all the tragedy that could happen in their workspace. So, for me, that was very inspiring as well. And, we have Christian artists who do great work. And for me, it's so many of them. I couldn't even begin to pinpoint all of them, but there are just a lot of good people doing some great things and have great testimonies. And even college students we have in here who's just taking a stand for Christ and, living a life that's good and noteworthy, even in what they do as maybe a president or a vice president of BSU and, inspiring their classmates. It's just so many great things that people are doing that I feel to me is influential. So they need to be seen and heard.
Absolutely. I think a lot of those things that you listed that they're doing are necessary in the sense of sometimes people have, I guess you could say, lofty goals and want to do something quote unquote big or something that's on TV or something that makes a lot of money or gets a lot of followers. And I found a level of contentment in doing things that actually have an immediate effect or an effect in my community that's tangible, but also things that have a long term effect in terms of eternity. And I'm talking about salvation and people coming to Jesus. Um, I've learned to be guided by those things, and to me, it's more fulfilling to see someone live a better quality of life, or have a new perspective, or be enlightened by something. It seems to me that that tends to be more fulfilling than just something that yields a large income. That's not discounting money. Of course, money is great and it opens doors for other
Yeah.
things. But I've come to terms with thinking about legacy, and have decided that I want to leave more of an impact on people personally and deeply, rather than just a wide net of kind of surface level interactions. It's more important to make an impact at a deeper level. And that might be
I
fewer people, but it's well worth it.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And I honestly have the same sentiment. But I'm not gonna lie, there's a part of me that wanted some type of affirmation for what I was doing.
Mm.
Everybody wants to say like, "Oh, I don't do it for that, I don't do it." But there is a small part in our society, especially for some sort of man, that was good job. Every Saturday morning or every third Saturday, I go and volunteer in Inglewood, and I do free counseling and things like that. But then when I come home, I look and see Kim Kardashian on the TV, or doing
Hmm.
something that's really not even important, and she's making all this money and getting all this attention. I'm like, dude, I just been working my butt off doing needed stuff, and all you got to do is go show a boob and you famous.
Right,
you
right.
and so that is pretty annoying. And so for me,
Yeah.
I think we can have both. I think there is a way for us to turn the tables and to put the attention where it needs to be. People who have great talents that maybe don't fit into an industry, but fit into a ministry, should be able to be seen and heard. And
Hmm.
for me, I want that to be the forefront of this, is for God to really get the glory out of people finally being recognized that maybe
Hmm.
have been ignored for a long period of time, or maybe just
Hmm.
wanted to know, am I doing it for the right reasons, or am I going in the right
Right.
direction?
Yeah.
It's needed. I'm not the person to ignore the fact if someone pats me on the back and say good job, it helps me. That's what we're doing. And I feel like sometimes we gotta give in to that, like, hey, you do want somebody to say it every now and then, so it's okay.
Yeah.
You're not a narcissist for wanting it, but
Hmm.
let's just do it and allow for more people to get it, and support other people, and it'll catch on. And that's what BCI is doing. We're trying to teach people how to be supporters, and then they'll get more support. That's what the real thing is about. I
Hmm.
don't want us to have this crabs in a barrel mentality where, if I can't get out, you can't get out. Like, that's
Yeah.
not how we
Hmm.
have to think. If we all pushed each other up, we could all get out the barrel together and shine. So that's really what I'm trying to do, is lead by example with how, if we promote others, we can get it ourselves.
It seems like I lit a fire somewhere. But
You
I'll
said
since
it was a
this
little fire.
well, since we're there, let's go a little further. And I'm just going to preface this and say this is going to be Black family table in-house discussion at this point. Uh, I was listening to a podcast, and I'll go ahead and shout them out because I want to support them because I feel like they're doing great work. It's called the Roommates Podcast, and these two guys, two young guys, doing great interviews, having great conversations about things of importance, things that matter. They have a variety of people on. They've had some more famous people, some lesser known people, all just very positive and good stuff from young Black men. It's a great show. And recently they were talking about the fact that, and it's quality too. So a lot of times I know sometimes when Christians produce things, it's not up to par. But they have
Right.
great video quality, editing. You can tell they're putting a lot into that.
Mhm.
And I've always wondered, like, where do they get the resources to have multiple cameras from multiple angles every episode and all these different people? And they're traveling to go interview these people, and the hosts live in two different states. Like, how are they doing this? And what I've grown to respect is the quality of what they do. And they recently have pointed out that they are having a hard time sustaining the show.
Mm,
And they tried to do Patreon and have people support financially if people like it, but they're
yeah.
not getting much support. I think they're
Yeah.
getting a percentage of support compared to how many people are listening and downloading.
Mm,
And they start this conversation of how I think they were talking about their listeners, but specifically Black people, we
mhm.
can support with our dollars some ignorant and negative stuff, but we don't put money behind things that are positive and good. Not saying we never do, but I won't say any particular rapper's name, but there's a lot of rappers we'll put our money behind, but we
Yeah.
don't put our money behind other things. And it's concerning. So that led to another conversation that I had with one of my mentors about a nonprofit that I'm starting. Uh, and he was very real with me about, well, man, that's good intentions, and that's a
Mhm.
great thing to do, but people tend to people are funny, were his words,
Yeah.
in terms of what they put their purse behind or their wallet behind.
Yep.
And then when you do something that's Black male focused, we're not always the priority. We're not as marketable. It's a lot easier to market something for a white woman than it is for a Black
Mhm.
man. So I'd love to get your thoughts on the idea of Black culture, Black people, and what we support.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's actually, for me, sadly enough, it was one of my biggest concerns with, making this a full-time business of mine is, everybody, well, Black people don't support Black people. They won't, the moment you start to try to monetize anything, they won't support or be around it, But I honestly, I think now this is just me and I'm getting started and people, I'm like, well, you'll learn. But I honestly believe that that's not a good way to stigmatize how we have been pictured, because if you put a beauty salon or things that people need-based businesses incorporated into our communities, we support that, and a lot of
Hmm.
times we aren't strategic with incorporating needs into our businesses. We don't just support let's see, Walgreens, or I don't know if I can say their name, Walteens. I'll say, with that extra dollar when they ask us, hey, you want to donate an extra dollar to blah, blah, blah. But we're first in there because we need something. And then we might add that extra dollar for the cause. We first have to get people in based
Hmm.
off of a need and then add on the good cause, because whether you want to say it or not, people honestly need stuff, and they will say it in person that they support a lot of the causes, but they're not really giving money to that unless it's intertwined with something they're already doing. And so I just think that we have to be more strategic with how we utilize our methods. And the other thing is
Yeah.
that a lot of I'm going to probably get hurt for this, but I think a lot of times our customer service amongst each other, it's like family, like, but we not family though.
Yeah.
You don't know me. We didn't grow up together, but we're so common with each other and we don't treat each other with, high priorities, that we kind of lose sight that these are paying customers and that people deserve, a high level of customer service, and that's just how it is. When you're in corporate America, they have you acting and representing their company a specific type of way. And I feel like we need to do better at that. I've been around a lot of companies, and, I've been a director of diversity, and I've seen a whole lot. And I can say that that has been a big problem for me, is that we do not treat our customers, we don't treat ourselves the way we deserve to be treated. And that again will drive people to go elsewhere.
Yeah, I think those are two great points. One, the balance, because I don't want to come off as if I'm just saying black people don't support nothing. I think I agree with you as well. I think both are true that some don't, but also we need to be more strategic in how we're presenting things and not just assume that because I'm black, you should support me. Because I think that's for the birds too. But also, um, I have had, and once again, this is kitchen table talk, but I've
Yeah.
had a lot of experiences, I'll preface it this way. I've had great experiences with some black businesses, yes.
Hmm.
But I think also, I think our people need to take our people seriously if we're the primary consumer, because I have been in situations where black business X will have their hours posted as 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. But at the last minute, they'll decide to open at 2 p.m. on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. And it's like, okay, guys, you
Exactly. Right.
can't you can't do that. Like, you have to have a system set up where at the very least your business is opening and closing at the time that's posted. It can't be a depending on how I feel situation if you want to call it a business,
Yep.
or make your hours shorter if you can't manage. So I think that goes back to the strategicness or the strategic planning in terms of what's realistic as far as business growth. What hours can we sustain comfortably and professionally, rather than setting the bar high and then not meeting expectations. I've always been taught to to under promise and over deliver rather than over promising and under delivering.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the under sell thing is just huge. We don't realize sometimes the value that we have in the small things, and so we try to oversell what we do because we think it'll make us sound better or look better. When honestly, it only makes us look worse, because when we can't deliver on what we pumped it up to be, we really just kind of are left out in the cold, and we're left to disappoint people. And so for me, I think that's the biggest thing, is to, like you said, just undersell it, not undersell yourself and your worth, but just to kind of don't build up these huge announcements and, yeah, everybody's going to be da da da, because the truth of the matter is, startup businesses, you have kinks, you have hiccups, you have tech issues, and you have to work through it, and you have to have good customer service. If there's one thing you can build up and oversell, is your customer service, going above and beyond, like, not that I'm going to give you the best of the best product every single time, but you can guarantee the best service. That's one thing you can control. And for me, I feel like that's all you need. People, you give them good customer service, everything else is kind of like, oh, well, yeah, I guess that's okay. If you're able to just kind of be accommodating and compromise. But unfortunately, we have a lot of learning to do in that area, because we lose money because we don't want to seem weak sometimes. And that's how we get in the places where we are now, where we don't have people wanting to support us as much, because we want to seem like we are just this over the top person that doesn't make any mistakes.
While in that vein, could you give us one, if you have more than one, that's fine, but one major key or tip for business owners, and then one major key or tip as far as communication, as you are the educator, for those that are communicating thoughts, whatever they may be in whatever setting. One for business owners and one for educators slash communicators.
Yeah, yeah. So I think for me, business owners need to take surveys for their customers that do come in. If you have a customer, everybody has a customer. Anybody you're selling something to, whether it's a service or a good, get their feedback, even the bad ones that like, oh, they probably didn't have the best experience. You especially want their feedback, because that's what's going to help you and to improve. Don't be afraid of having negative feedback, because that's the only way you're going to make more money if you're a business. negative feedback is your friend. And so for me, I look forward to sometimes seeing the results of focus groups and surveys. And I've done a lot of that before I even released some of the services that BCI has to offer. I allowed for a lot of people to just give me feedback on what they needed. I listened, and for that's communication to me, is just listening to people and not trying to defend. So for a communication skill, don't defend, listen. If somebody gives you
Hmm.
some criticism that you don't like, don't defend it. Just listen to it and take it down. If it doesn't apply, you think that maybe they're having something else related to it, don't even think of it as being, like, oh, this isn't an outlier and unrelatable. Still try to improve on it, because even if it is an outlier, you could never go wrong trying to improve on something. And so for me, that's where I always feel like I succeed, is because I don't take any negative advice as something that, is something that's thrown out. I just use it all. I'm like, okay, well, I definitely can improve upon that. Maybe that wasn't my fault, but I still can improve upon that. And that's how you have these businesses that grow and communication skills that only improve with time.
Good stuff. So, in closing, I'd like to give people the opportunity to connect with you and also potentially be a client of Black Christian influencers if they're interested. So, if you could share the ways to connect with you and your business, as well as some of the services that are offered.
Absolutely. So Black Christian Influencers is growing, and we are an invite only community as of right now for influencers, but we welcome all support and encouragement. But for influencers that might be interested in becoming a part of our network, we're currently open to having new members, and we're looking for people who are impacting their community, or their ministry is doing something that's powerful and unique or different. And that's what we're looking for. As far as engagement wise, we want to make sure you have an audience that's listening to you and that you can actually have some responses from. We would love to invite you to our network. If you're interested in being a part, it's blackchristianinfluencers.com, and you can click on become an influencer. You can find us on all social medias, Facebook and Instagram, at Black Christian Influencers. So any way you want to touch base or even partner with us, we're open to that as well.
Sounds good. Thank you for joining us. This is Maliek Blade, and that was Guest Who.